Asaki here. Happy spring! I hope you're enjoying the weather and not being suffered from allergies. Today, I'm gonna introduce you Intimate Apparel by Lynn Nottage. I feel like I'm saying that to every single play I introduce here, but this is one of my best favorite play. Why? Because you can see Intimate Apparel. It's about clothes. It's about making clothes. Well, it's just not that. What I love is the intricacy of the language and Esther, who is the central character of the play. Her journey, or what we call the character arc, is just really gorgeous. As usual, I will read the snippet of the play at the end of this video. So yeah, stay tuned. So, what is this play about? The play takes place in New York City in 1905. Esther Mills, African American seamstress from Georgia, who has been living in this boarding house run by Mrs. Dixon for 18 years now. Esther's specialty is to make an exquisite corsets and camisoles, which is called intimate apparel, to a wide range of customers, such as Mrs. Van Buren, who is a wealthy white lady who lives on the Fifth Avenue, or Mamie, an African American lady of the night, and she is also a singer. At the beginning of the play, she starts to correspond with George, a construction worker who is working at the Panama Canal building site. Esther is illiterate, so she gets help from other ladies around her to write back to George. Another character is Mr. Marx, an Orthodox Jewish man from Romania who sells expensive and exquisite fabric and textiles to Esther so she can make corsets to her customers. As the title suggests, every scene takes place in the intimate spaces like bedrooms and boudoirs, which is a private room or sitting room for women. Because it takes place in intimate spaces, the conversation they have tend to be very intimate too. They confide each other's secrets and desires and concerns. The word intimate is also a physical one. Esther brings to the garments to Mrs. Van Buren or Mamie, so they share physically intimate spaces with each other. You can easily imagine dressing and undressing is an intimate act, especially when that is for an undergarment. Esther has been living in Mrs. Dixon's boarding house and shares the private quarters with her. Well, private, intimate spaces with her. Mr. Marx sells his fabric in his bedrooms because he lives in a tenement apartment. So she will be stepping into his private and intimate space. It's really interesting when you allow someone to be in your intimate space. The emotional space between you and the other person gets so close, and you might spill some beans that you were not expecting to. One of the brilliant things of this play is the structure, how the story proceeds. Esther goes to different location each scene, and audience follow her as the story goes on, right? So in the first scene, we see Esther talk with Miss Dixon in her room in a boarding house. Next scene, we follow her into Mrs. Van Buren's boudoir on Fifth Avenue. Then we see her in Mr. Mark's apartment. Then we go to Mamie's boudoir. So every time we see each character again, the time has passed and Esther changes. So her relationship to this character she meets changes too. What's brilliant is that the structure itself is giving the sense of Esther's life, not just about her constantly going and coming and going to different spaces. It also shows her lifestyle is almost like a clockwork, like from the house to this place to this place to this place. As she tells Mrs. Van Buren that she goes to church on Sundays and goes to Mr. Marks on Tuesdays and so forth. And when you see the pattern gets disrupted in Act 2, which I want you to really look at that when you read the play, it's showing Esther's emotional disruption, and that's disturbing the routine of her life. In theater classes, we are often asked to question, why is this day different from any other day in a play or a scene? I want to talk about how this day of the first scene takes place is different from any other day for Esther, and how that ignites the change in her life. And once it happens, she cannot really go back to where she was before. In the very first scene, the so Act 1 Scene 1, a wedding party is happening downstairs for one of Esther's housemates, but Esther is staying at her room and making a camisole for the bride for her wedding night. And she tells to Mrs. Dixon, who came and asked like what's going on, why are you not joining the party? She says she doesn't feel like it. She doesn't feel like she can keep the fake smile and ruin the bride's big day while she's making a camisole for her. So she's really, really sweet. She has been living in New York and this boarding house for 18 years, and she has seen so many of her housemates has come and got married and left the house, and probably she had so many customers who has came and gone through her life. During that 18 years, she has her routine established and her life hasn't been changed much, and she is really frustrated, but she doesn't know how to change until this letter comes from a stranger in Panama. His name is George, and George works in a Panama Canal aside of a deacon's son of the church she goes to. So he asked her to correspond, be a friend, and she agrees to. So that's like the first cog of the machine that starts to turn, and one cog to another, and the change keeps on happening. And that is the moment of the difference. What's the difference between this day and yesterday? We talk about in a class. That day, she received a letter from a stranger. It's really interesting how life changes like a chain reaction of or a domino effect. It all starts with the question, why is day different from any other day? Before she received a letter from George, I feel like she was almost prudish about any type of romantic gaze toward her. In fact, she scoffs off a potential suitor. Mrs. Dixon tries to get Esther on board in this first scene. But this letter from George made her notice how Mr. Marks is present in her mind, or at least the audience see how Mr. Marks is already present in her mind. And this letter subconsciously encourages her to step into his life in a more personal, intimate way. On the outside, their relationship seems to be of a customer and a merchant, but their conversation about fabrics and textiles is somehow sounds very sensual. But because Mr. Marx's devotion to his family and moreover his religion, Esther cannot even touch him to correct his color. Lynn Nottage talks about the character of Esther is roughly based on her great grandmother, who was also a seamstress in New York City. She said in an interview that she was going through her grandmother's stuff and found a photograph of her great grandmother holding two babies, and I assume one of them is her grandmother. And that's where her journey started to write this play. She said she didn't find much more about her aside from she was a seamstress in New York around turn of the century, and she married to a man from Barbados just like George and Esther, but the ending of the play is different from the ending of their actual life story. I've only read a few of Lynn Nottage's play, namely Ruined, which, as you can see, I've read for class 3 times in 2 semesters. This is also really, really much harder read, but I definitely recommend that. Another thing I wanted to mention is that she co-created live performance installation called This is Reading, which took place in vacant train station in Reading, PA, and our Erlina was involved with that project. And so I got to see that, and it was really beautiful. What I always admire is her skill of creating and describing the world these characters are in. Through her description of the clothes and music and the room setting, I can picture exactly what kind of room they're in and what kind of society they're living. But she's not wordy like some other playwrights who goes on and about what the rooms looks like and what kind of decoration. Just she is very concise and efficient about her language, but it still takes you to the world of the play. And I love when those super skilled writers take you to the world they created. You are almost like living in that world they created. And that's like the magic of the reading, and that's the magic of the theater. And hopefully we get to experience the theater part of it soon. I'm missing a live theater so much right now. So while we wait for the physical theater to come back, please read this play and display if you want to, even though I didn't really introduce Ruin today. Oh, yeah, while you read this play, I want you to take a moment to appreciate the end of each act and how she paints the moment. It goes back to her discovery of her great grandmother and her life story, and it's just it's just so beautiful. So I only talked about the romantic side of the play and how the moment of change happens in this play, but there is also a discussion of the classism, racism, of course, the nuance of the time those characters are living, and so yeah, please read Lynn Nottage's Intimate Apparel. So I'm gonna read the snippet of the play from, I think it's the scene 3 when we see Mr. Marks at the first time. So I told you about how they talk about the fabric and the textile. It almost sounds sensual. I love her description of the moment. Esther laughs and returns to examine the fabric, revealing the tactile pleasure of its texture. There is a sensual quality to how Esther regards the fabric. Mr. Marks can't help but notice this. She brings the fabric to her nose and sniffs. Marks watches her with genuine delight. It's fruit dye. Am I right? It smells like an imperial palace. It is signed by the artist right here. I wouldn't be surprised if it was created for an empress. You really want me to buy this, don't you? All right. It means I'll go without sugar for a week. Will that make you happy? It makes you happy. It makes me happy. Oh Lord, I do want it. Ah, now I want to go to fabric shop and just enjoy that moment of encountering a beautiful fabric. So, thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you for watching. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy these videos, and if you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and check out our website. We have been adding some features on there. So yeah, see you soon. Bye.